Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hello, everybody. This is Jared. Welcome back to another episode of All Things Crime. I am excited to be back with you. It's been a little bit, Memorial Day weekend and all that. So excited to be back here. And today we have a special guest that is kind of not typical for the show. His name is Jimmi Toro. And I'll tell you, I've been reading his profile and studying up on him a little bit and deciding, how best to approach interviewing Jimmi here and getting his story out to you. I'll tell you, it's pretty rare that, in my opinion, that victims are able to tell their story over and over. But what really intrigued me about Jimmi is not only the trauma that he went through, and actually went through twice from what you say in your profile, Jimmi, but also that you have healed from it and that you have the ability to overcome this trauma and lead basically a normal life. And that is really intriguing to me. And I think a lot of society needs to learn this because frankly, there's so much trauma out there that I think is going not just unrealized, but also unaddressed. So Jimmi, it's a pleasure to have you on. And I want to go to Amazon.com, just reading in his book. And I don't want to get into actual details about some of the trauma that you went through, but I do want to read a little bit of this. Imagine, if you will, a group of sadist cowards essentially traumatizing a 4-year-old. Jimmi lived these and hundreds of similar horrors twice. First as a child at the hands of ritualistic sexual deviants, and decades later, the horror resurfaced in an avalanche of extreme pain, awful memories, and massive hormonal damage to my body. But his book is called Heal, and he's also an artist and a painter. And I've been looking at some of your paintings, Jimmi, and just extraordinary. Even the cover of your book, I think is so leveled in there. I don't know if I'm not an artistic type. So the levels of trauma that I see just in your book cover is pretty unbelievable. So Jimmi, I want to ask you if you would first kind of go into detail about the initial trauma that you experienced as a 4-year-old, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, you bet. So what's interesting relative to your podcast and the subject you talk about is, let's say you take a classic father who beats his child, right? He gets angry one day and beats his child, puts his fist on his face and draws blood. Well, that's child abuse, right? Well, if you take a same kind of person who rapes his child, that's a lot worse. It's a whole different level of abuse, right? Well, to make that even worse, you take an individual who rapes his child and enjoys it. Now you're getting into the real awful predators of the world. These are sadists. These are, the definition of sadist is somebody who enjoys inflicting pain on another. And these are the types of predators that law enforcement and others like myself are trying to figure out and find and protect our communities, especially our little kids from. Now, these types of predators, they often work alone, like a serial killer might, but they also organize in groups. And let's talk about two types of groups. One would be a group similar to like an individual who owns a brothel, right? Well, they have a business. And they have clientele and they have a product. And the product usually is a sex worker. And their clients come in, they pay them money, they put them in a room and they do what they do and they do it over and over and over and they make money at it. Well, these awful cowards, child abusers, pedophiles, etc., they do the same thing, but their product is children. And they're definitely more underground because the last thing they want to do is get found out, because it's all illegal. Well, in those situations, they have a product, and the product is children, little children, and their clientele are the awfulest people in the world. And they will come to an establishment like that, and they have their preferences. They may say, I want a 4-year-old blonde boy, or I want a 6-year-old Asian girl, or whatever they order, let's say, to satisfy their creepy behavior. These children, they often age out. Sometimes boys will age out around age 8 or 9 or something like that. That's not uncommon, because a little boy can start to fight back and not be as easily manageable. Unfortunately, girls take the brunt of this. Most of child abuse happens to girls by far more than boys. And often the girls stay longer in an organization like that. Sometimes these organizations will kill the children after they've been abused for years and years and harvest their organs on the black market. So there's a whole nother crime syndicate that goes on, a whole nother way that these creepy people can make money. Well, because their product can die, can age out, etc., they're always on the look for more product. And so in your communities, these creeps wake up every day and they literally scheme and plot and plan to steal your child if they can. That's what they do. And so if you have children in a community, your 13-year-old daughter is walking around in the mall with their friends, there's a high likelihood that they are being viewed by a predator and they don't even know it. Then you have a different type of organization of these creeps, and it falls more into like the sexual ritualistic stuff, the religious stuff, the satanic worshipers, etc. And they get together in their little creepy bands and they have their rituals and they wear their robes. And central to many of these groups, and this has been the way through history, central to their creepy deviant rituals is to sacrifice children. It's just what they do. And they enjoy it. That's the thing that most people in the community don't understand is how can a human being enjoy that awful behavior? Well, they do. And there's a whole lot of psychologists trying to figure out why an adult can grow up and become that kind of adult. I sort of don't care. I just know they do. And they're out there and they're very harmful. Well, my story was being caught up in that situation where I was little, my dad mostly, and several other groups in a little community in Central California. They were involved in these religious rituals where they abused and tortured and killed children. And I made it out alive, and many kids don't. And so from about age 3 to about age 8, for all those years, this kind of awful stuff happened to me. And it's unimaginably awful. It's not just like we're going to lock you up in a room for a day and not give you food and water. That doesn't satisfy what they do. Years ago, I read a book called POW about the prisoners of war in Vietnam. And one prisoner describes a story where he was being tortured. The torturer took his finger and put it in the prisoner's eye and rolled it around, which is awful, right? Well, what made it even worse is he noticed that the torturer was sexually aroused while he was doing it. And these creeps who do this stuff, they are aroused sexually, and they are only satisfied if there's screams and torture and pain and abuse off the charts, to the point where they enjoy even killing kids as part of what they get off, what brings them some sick pleasure. From the mouth or from the quote of a convicted sex offender, I am master manipulator. I manipulate children and I manipulate adults. I was a father, a brother, a son, a husband, an uncle, and nobody had a clue that I wanted to have sex with 5-year-old little Susie. They are really good at hiding, and they're addicted. I'm another pedophile. I am addicted to torturing, raping, brutalizing little kids as I am to cocaine. It's more of an addiction. These creeps are addicts hardcore. And as you know, they don't change. Once they've hit that bottom, they are that way for life. One last quote from one of these creeps, and we'll move on, is he says, "A little child to me is no different than a ham sandwich. A ham sandwich is an object that satisfies my need for hunger. A little child is an object that satisfies my need to sexually abuse and dominate." These are the kind of predators we're dealing with out there in our communities. And I assume in your line of work, you run into these creeps, and you run into, how do we find them, and how do we warn neighborhoods and communities that they are waking up plotting to hurt and steal and ruin our children because they enjoy it so much.
Wow. Yeah. Of the sexual crimes detectives and people that I've worked with, OUR and different organizations like that, it's one of the things that I have always kind of attested to is, in my mind, sexual crimes, especially against children, are actually more damaging to society than even homicides, because in a murder, and I don't want to kind of belittle or minimize how awful homicides are, but when an individual is murdered, the pain from that crime to that victim is over. The murder victim's gone.
Yeah.
Now there's lasting trauma, obviously, to the family, but the problem with sex crimes, especially against little children, is that trauma lives for the rest of that person's life. And, when you take the most innocent and you expose them to the worst situation that they can possibly physically endure and be a part of, then psychologically, physically, mentally, there's all sorts of ways that person is now so damaged and is carrying that, and not only individually has to deal with, but there's I don't know what the exact stats are, but the number of sexual predators who were themselves sexually abused when they were younger is off the charts. So
let me explain that a little bit if I could.
Yeah, please.
When you're a little kid, and this applies to adults too, but we'll talk about kids mostly. When you're a little kid and you're tortured or abused or you experience a level of trauma, the one thing you want more than anything by far is you want safety. And, if you're abused by your caretakers or your parents, or you're in a situation where you cannot find safety, you literally store all of that abuse in your body. Now, if you're a little girl and you're raped as a 4-year-old by an uncle and you can find safety in your mom's arms, you have a mother who loves you, you can literally release that abuse at that moment. You can get it out of your system. But when you don't have that safety to go to, you literally store it all. And what happens, it's not uncommon with men. This is the case with me, as I stored this for 30, 40 years. It's not uncommon with men to have that, what they call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And then in case of child abuse, it's just put a C in front of it, CPTSD, standing for child. When that comes tumbling back into your adult life, it's not uncommon to come back in your early 50s. That's not uncommon. And so your body literally stores that for all those decades. And it can come back. It can be triggered and come back. An event can happen, or it can come back absolutely random, just completely out of the blue. And when it comes back, when those episodes come back, people hear about this with kids who go to war and they come back from war post and they have these memories come back, which mess with their whole lives. Well, it's not just the memory that comes back. It's the sights, the sounds, the smells. It's everything comes back. And let's say, so in one case when I was little, I was buried in a coffin, a 4-year-old little kid. Imagine it. These creeps all doing their ritualistic stuff. And they enjoy this, by the way. And, to make it worse, they put a dead body in the coffin. It was an adult body, and they cut it from its throat down and ripped the guts out. So its ribs were splayed out. And so they put this little kid, me and several others, stuck in this cavity of this dead body in a coffin in the ground, shut the lid, and for all you know, that's it. Talk about the level of scared that little kid goes through. Well, when that memory comes back, that level of scared comes back with a vengeance. You feel every bit of it. You feel all of that. And not just that. When that happens to you, your body excretes these hormones, these panic hormones, these fight and flight hormones, adrenaline, cortisol rush through your body. And talk about extreme panic. And well, as an adult, when these come back, all those hormones come back as well. It all comes back. And so when I'm revisiting this as an adult, my whole body is in extreme panic. I feel exactly what that little boy was feeling. Exactly. I feel like I'm going to die. I feel like I'm suffocating to death. And it's awful. To your point, it literally can live with you your whole life. And even though you may go decades without the memory resurfacing, you often know something's there and you can't figure out what it is. And many of these survivors turn to alcohol, turn to other forms of addictions to mask it and to cover it up. Unfortunately, many commit suicide, and that's the end of it. And the healing process is not easy. It's really painful because you have to relive all that. But the healing process is also very magical. You literally have to go back to that moment, and you can literally change the narrative and can literally get that out of your body. Unfortunately, many adults, I would say most adults, do not heal because they often have like a dilemma of, okay, I can live with what's familiar with me in my life. Kind of like the classic case of, which this happens a lot of young girls, little girls are raped. And then as they become teenagers and older, they find that they gravitate toward men who abuse them because that's familiar. As awful as it is, it's familiar territory. Well, we can live with our traumas and our abuses, which is awful, or we can go face them, which is more painful. But you got to go the more painful route if you want to heal it, in my opinion. And it can heal, and it's absolutely magical. We can get into the healing process if you want.
Yeah, I definitely want to transition into that pretty quick, but just kind of to recap, just to fully understand where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So as a 4-year-old, and this is in pretty much every description of your book and your biography that I read. So as a 4-year-old, now the sadists and the ritualistic people that were doing this to you, were they related to you?
Yeah, my father was part of it. There were several other families. This is not uncommon in a given area. These creeps have kids, they have families, and they involve their kids in it. They often won't involve all their kids. They're clever. You have to remember like in my case, there were 10 of us kids, and they only involved me and my sister. And they often will pick like that because if the authorities find out and they ask all the other kids, and they say, no, nothing's happening to us, then they won't believe the one that something is happening to. And it's very common in family situations to not want to talk about this kind of stuff. If a child is being abused in a family, 95% of the time or more, that child is being abused by somebody the child knows, either a parent or an uncle or a friend that comes over frequently, etc. And so I would say to people listening to this, if there's a child you're part of a family of and you feel maybe something's up, believe the kid. The kids do not lie. They don't make this stuff up. And yet, in many situations, the kids aren't listened to, they're not heard, and they're not believed. I mean, a classic scenario, I have a friend who was a young girl. She was fine with the mom and dad that they got a divorce. The mom married a new guy who abused her around age 9, raped her, and She cries out to mom, and mom doesn't believe it. There's no way this new boy I'm in love with would do that to you, etc. That's very common.
Yeah, especially the new boyfriends that come in. I think that some of them, especially the ones that are, like you said, sneaky about it, they'll actually seek out for vulnerable situations like that where, recently divorced. So
they target them.
The mom is traumatized. The kids are exposed. Yeah.
Yeah, these predators, they will gravitate towards working for orphanages, Boys and Girl Scouts of America. You find them as coaches at schools. They go where the kids are. Religious groups, vulnerable families. I have another friend in Texas who, when he was a young boy, there was a group of pedophiles in this town that were Boy Scout leaders, and they literally targeted mothers who had no fathers in the home, who had young boys, and said, oh, we'll be the father figure to your boy. Join the Boy Scouts, which happened, and he got all kinds of abuse.
So as a 4-year-old, you were put into a coffin with a body that had been basically disemboweled. Yeah. And you were buried. Now, did you, how did you know you were being buried?
Well, if you are put in a coffin and the lid shuts and you're banging on the lid because you want to escape and you can't because it's however they locked it shut, nailed it, or just put weight on it. And you hear the dirt being thrown on it. And well, like any good torturer, they know how to push people right to the edge, right? And to make it even worse, let's say, when I was exhausted and thought that's the end, well, they opened up the lid. And can you imagine what a little boy would see when that lid opens up? Well, they don't see carrying adults. They see adults laughing at them and enjoying themselves. Talk about being psychologically messed up, that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, they get their kicks in doing that. And so they take it right to the limit. And sometimes they fail. Sometimes they torture a kid too far and it kills them. Sometimes death is part of the ritual. Not every kid who's involved in that makes it out alive, although many do. I have no idea how I made it out alive. That's just one story. I went through hundreds and hundreds of these. And so think about that, jump to the healing process just a little bit. If you're like adult you're like a bus driver. Got this bus, and the passengers on your bus are a bunch of little you. And if you were abused, let's say 200 times for X amount of years, you have 200 passengers on your bus, each one a unique traumatic situation. And your job is you got to go back to each one of those instances when you're being traumatized. And not all trauma involves blood and extreme pain, although a lot of it does. Some trauma is just not being heard. Some trauma is carrying the weight of witnessing another child your age being killed. Some trauma is being lost. Some trauma is having to hide in a certain situation where there was danger and you got away with hiding, yet you're scared to death that you'll be found out. All kinds of interesting types of trauma that you can carry with you throughout your whole life. I mean, you can not go through any of that awful stuff. You could be a young girl on a playground, the bullies come and pull your pants down and it traumatizes you. You can carry that your whole life. It's not rape and blood and torture. So yeah, you got to go back and find all those traumatic situations and deal with each one separately until you heal them all.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to transition into. So how did you begin your healing process, and how has that led to where you are today?
Okay, so the healing process is really interesting. It's interesting because there are a lot of opinions from a lot of professionals and so-called professionals about how to do this. The psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, counselors, etc., who all work on this. There are somatic types of healing processes. Somatic mean body work, from breathing techniques, tapping on different places of the body. There's eye movement techniques. There's yoga type of movement techniques. There's even a whole technique around drama where you like go on a stage in front of people and reenact your trauma, which I'm not a fan of that or some of these other ones. Then there's more of like the talk type of therapy where you're talking with a psychiatrist or somebody and you talk it out and you go there. So in my case, what worked for me is that, and this is really fascinating, is so in my case, I'll describe an episode, like a major panic attack is like something just comes over your body. And you don't really know what it is, but your body is in extreme panic. You're in extreme pain. Your heart's racing off the chart. You are uncontrollably shaking. You can't stop it. And you literally feel like you're going to die. When I had my first one, I was like about age 45 and I thought I was having a heart attack because I had no memory. I just had the physical effects of this. I got rushed to the hospital, checked out. Sir, you have nothing wrong with you. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's up with that? For 14 years, I had these extreme panic attacks, probably 2 or 3 a week, thousands of them. I've been to every doctor, naturopathic doctor, spiritual healer, anything you can imagine. All of them for 14 years, none of them could find anything wrong with me. And then as I'm entering to my 15th year, so basically the beginning of last year, I had my first memory come. And it was worse. I thought what I was going through was bad. It was even worse. Now, one of the challenges that's tough if a memory does come back to you is you don't know how many there are. You could have been abused 10 times and you got 10 to go through and then you're done. Or it could be hundreds. And in my case, it was hundreds, and it took almost all of 2022 to get through them all. Now, what I learned through that process is you as an adult, when this ugly thing hits you and the memory hits you, you want to identify what emotion are you feeling. That's more important than identifying what's actually happening to you, although it's part of. And so with that confidence in it, let's say the emotion I'm feeling is suffocation and death, right? That's what I'm feeling. So I go back there as adult me and I go find that little me right in the act of it happening. Now, my job isn't to rescue that little guy. My job is to help that little guy rescue himself, to empower him, to whisper in his ear, to encourage him, whatever. And each time I went back and found that little kid in the midst of a certain traumatic event, in this case, I whispered in his ear and I asked him, what do you want to do? And in this particular case, it was fairly simple. He just wanted to get out of there. And so he was able to sneak out when the adults weren't looking, and I grabbed him and we took off. And that's really, really simple. In other cases, it was a lot more involved. Like in one case, there was little me was sitting in this room, and I identified the trauma, the emotion of the trauma as sound related. It was the traumatic sounds. If you watch a horror movie, which I hate, think of all the sounds that creative sound people do to accentuate the horror acts in a movie. Well, when that's your reality, you're sitting in this room, and in another room, you hear other kids screaming, being tortured, and you know that you're next. And they come and grab you. And these adults initially approach little me with kind of smiles on their faces, like, come on, little Jimmy. And well, if you refuse, their fake smiles turn to evil screams really quick. And they yell the most vile things in your face. And so, well, that's obviously very traumatic to a little guy. And so I found this little guy as the adult me, and I was able to whisper in his ear and say, what do you want to do also in that situation? And each time I did that, what that little kid decided to do completely surprised me. I had no preconceived idea, and it just happened. And in that case, it was far more extreme. He literally reached out, grabbed the throats of these men who were approaching him, and literally ripped the vocal cords right out of their throats. I can see it as clear as day. The blood everywhere, and their loud noises spitting out of their throats because that's where they're voiding blood, and it just left this carnage. There were 5 of them, 5 dead bodies, and that little kid jumped in my arms, and we got out of there and walked forever and ever and ever. Now that's fascinating in that it's magical. That actually never happened when that event happened to me years ago. And so we as adults, we have the ability to literally go back in time and help the little you change the story, change the narrative, alter the situation. And each time I did that, it worked. The trembling, panicky adult me, who I was when I was going through that, literally left. That memory is no longer in me. That the ill effects of it, I still remember it, but the ill effects of it. And while I'm going through this, I'm feeling exactly what the little guy's feeling. That cortisol, adrenaline just pumping through my body. And then I've had some beautiful ones. That once I went back and I was trying to identify the feeling, and sometimes I could find this little boy right away. Other times it took me days. This one took a long time, and I don't know why, but I'm sitting on the base of a mountain with this beautiful scene of like a meadow and the huge mountains behind me. And I'm feeling the emotion of extreme sadness, like sadness piled upon sadness, piled upon sadness. I see this little kid walking towards me in a distance. I recognize, okay, that's me. Instead of going to him, I didn't feel a need to go to him. I just felt a need to sit there and watch. And as he slowly walked by me with his head down, and I looked where he was going, and there was this female figure, like a motherly figure, sitting at the foothill of the mountain. I could tell he's going towards her. And so I moved closer, And I thought that when he approached her, he would approach her and they would have some sort of communication I could listen in on. And no, that didn't happen. He walked right up. She was sitting down. He walked right up to her, and without saying a word, he walked right into her lap in a fetal position, and she held him. And she was symbolic of a mother figure. And that is the safety that little guy wanted. And in that situation, that's the safety he got. And as soon as she held him, all the ill feelings completely left my body, completely, in an instant. And I went through hundreds of these over a year. And each time it was an absolute surprise, from beautifully touching to some awful blood stuff with a lot of blood and torture involved. And it works. And it's magical beyond magical, but it works. And this is not just me. This is backed up. That I read so many books going through all this process. And my favorite one is a book called The Body Keeps the Score. It's by an author called Dr. Van der Kolk. I think it's Kolk. And he's worked with patients for 50 years, and he echoes exactly what I'm saying. The body literally stores all that in, and this is the way you got it. It's like a lot of things in life. You know, if you want to become courageous and brave, where do you got to go? You got to go right into what fears you most. What you fear most would be a better way of saying it. And this is no different. And I can see why many people would hold on to trauma. I can see why they don't go there. It's so awful.
So based on what you just said,
Yeah,
you think a lot of people that have gone through trauma like this would rather try to suppress it than relive it.
absolutely. It's too painful.
So, but also from what I'm gathering, you're also saying that no matter what happens, eventually that's going to resurface. And
Well, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to it. Eventually it will resurface. That I don't know. I just know that in many cases it does resurface, and it's often triggered or it just comes out of the blue. I imagine in many cases, this is such a nuanced thing. It could resurface as a major explosion like it did, just like bam, hit you over the head. Or it could probably resurface, trickle in little bits of memories over time. But yeah, many people who live with a level of anxiety, which is a more common term, many of them know what it is. They know what they're anxious about. They can even name their fears. And yet they would rather mask it with some alcohol maybe than face it.
so when you first started dealing with the trauma,
Yeah.
and to me, it's astounding that you lived with it that long before you actually were, aggressively addressing it. Is this something that you had help with, or is this just based on your own research and you finally figured out how to do it?
Well, when the memories started coming back, well, okay, so for 14 years when I had all these episodes with no memory, not one, I don't want to shed too much shade on these people because they just don't know, but not one healing professional, from an acupuncturist to a spiritual healer to a doctor, ever said to me, hey, you could be experiencing trauma reliving in your body. Not one. So I had no clue what to do. But when the memories came back, as awful as they were, I was actually grateful because now I knew the source of the pain, right? And fortunately, it took me a few months, but I was able to find a psychologist who specialized in what they call SRA, sexual ritualistic abuse. It's let's say a particular brand of abuse. And she was magical. She taught me all this. She helped me go on this journey, and this magical journey of naming the emotion and helping the little kid heal, helping him create a safe space. Because, right, the one thing that kid wanted is safety. In those journeys that I went on, the thing, other than the knowledge, the thing that helped me the most was, while I was going through it, was to have somebody. It could have been a complete stranger, somebody to hold their hand. Because when you go back in there, when you go back into that trauma in your past, you literally, your mind, you are literally there. And it's important to stay grounded in the present. A lot of these techniques are based on this idea of staying grounded. There's a popular one called EMDR where the therapist will have run their finger back and forth and have you follow it with your eye. And the purpose of that is to keep you grounded. Like, hey, I'm sitting on a couch. I'm in a safe environment with somebody while I'm going back to this awful hell. And so in my case, it helped to have anybody, a spouse, a sibling, a child, even a friend, or even in one case, this thing happened to me and I was in a space where there was a complete stranger lady who I asked, could she just sit on the couch with me and hold my hand? Because when they happened to me, they happened. I couldn't stop. And she was gracious and nice. And I had to explain to her while I was going through this, what I was going through. And she got it. She sat there and held my hand as I went. And these episodes, going back into them often, some were days, some resolved quicker in, let's say, several hours. But yeah, having that safety that somebody, because when you experience it, it's you are reliving what the kid experienced. And what did the kid want once again? Wanted that hand to hold, wanted that safety. So important.
Wow, boy, I'm just trying to process this.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, I'm so far out of my league. It's just scary, Jimmy. I'm in my 50s like you are, and
Yeah.
I feel like I've experienced a lot of life, but I'm one of the fortunate ones that I don't think I've ever been through anything that was remotely as traumatizing as what you're describing. And for the things that I have experienced that have been difficult to mentally process, I think I've dealt with most of that. But so as well, first of all, I think it's important to basically identify what percentage, because you say there's a lot of these monsters, ritualistic and sadistic type people out there. But I would imagine, and I don't know if you actually have a percentage or a number out there, but I would imagine it's actually relatively small, the number of people that can do this. Because I know in crime in general, even as deep as some of these people get with the amount of torture and the pain that they try to, whether it be rage or anything else that they want to inflict on the other person for whatever reason.
Yeah.
A lot of spousal abuse is based on rage, based on anger that, of what the spouse did,
Yeah.
or the children. But you're describing a completely different level where people are actually sexually aroused because of the pain that they're inflicting on their victim. And, it's not an adult victim, it's a child victim. So, the child doesn't even have the ability to really fight back, let alone understand.
That's why they're the ultimate cowards, because they pick on the littlest of the little who can't fight back.
Yeah, I've got 5 kids, and the thought of doing something like that to a 4-year-old, to me, I can't even relate to it. And I guarantee 99% of the people listening or watching this cannot comprehend and cannot relate with doing something that evil to a 4-year-old.
They can't. But I try to do my best to bridge that gap a little bit. So for instance, if people understand that these pedophile types are literally addicted as they would be to cocaine or something else, that helps. Another thing to understand would be that, especially in the satanic religious cult realm, let's say, there is a little bit of a logic to this. Logic. And that is, to these people, their number one enemy is God. And the person they worship is Satan, if you believe in this stuff, right? Well, they logically sit there and they think, well, what is the one thing we can do to piss off God the most? Well, what is the one thing that God values the most? It would be little children. They're the most pure, the most innocent, the most amazing creatures on this earth. Okay, we're going to take the one thing God values the most, a little child, and we're going to abuse it as bad as we can because it pisses off God. As twisted as that is, that's the way many of them think. Now, back to your numbers thing. If you go to the National Sex Offenders Registry list, you can find out how many of those people live in your neighborhood, let's say. Okay, so in a given state in the United States, you might have an average of, let's say, 200 of these offenders per 100,000 people. So that gives you kind of a number thing. Some states are much higher, like the state of Oregon and Montana might be as high as 700. I don't know why Oregon, who knows? But keep in mind too that those are numbers from people who've been caught and busted. There are a whole lot more out there who have not been caught. So if you look at a mile radius of your neighborhood and you find, okay, there's 20 of these creeps living right in my neighborhood, there's probably, I don't know, 40, 50, maybe even 100 that have not been caught. Well, in a small community of, 30, 40,000 people, a little town, do the numbers. They're in your town. It's not a matter of are they there? They are. And many towns on corridors along major freeways, they become hubs for traffickers. You don't have to traffic a child from, Cambodia to America to be trafficked. You can traffic a child from one creepy organization down the road to another town of creepy organizations that know each other, that want to abuse your child. So I've started a nonprofit called rescue11.org. And our purpose is to go into communities and raise awareness to this fact. We're just getting started, but if any of your listeners are interested in starting a club in your town, we're setting up adult clubs and clubs in high schools. And the purpose is to get, to become a hub to a community and reach out to the mayor's office and to the law enforcement folks and to the legal folks and to the therapists, to other religions who care about this stuff, to other nonprofits, and organize and raise awareness to this fact that these creeps are in your town and these are their tactics. I mean, they will an adult creep will sit in a mall and watch 3 little 11-year-old girls walk by, and they will pay a 10-year-old boy a bunch of money to go befriend those little girls and invite them to a party. They have their tactics of getting kids online, as you know. They'll pretend like they're a 13-year-old girl, yet it's a 45-year-old creep talking to a young girl. And they're good. They're like, like a lion will sit on the sidelines and watch a bunch of wildebeest run by, and they know how to pick out the infirm ones, the aged ones, the young ones, sick ones, the injured ones. These creeps, they're good. They're very good at spotting kids who are more vulnerable and their tactics of getting to them.
I'm definitely more on the investigative side, where once they actually identify the crime, then how they catch them, especially DNA related, that's kind of where me and my expertise, along with our system, the MVAC system, comes into play. Physical evidence, but what we're describing here, so if let me give you an example. If a kid is kidnapped, for example, and they find his backpack or something like that, then we can use the MVAC to try to get the perpetrator's DNA from areas of the backpack that he might have grabbed in order to force a kid into a car, something like that. That's kind of where we come in. But in dealing with the after effects of whatever trauma this child is going through, even a botched kidnapping, that the kid walking along the road that he's probably, or the street, he's walked that 100 times or 1,000 times before with no problems. And now all of a sudden somebody drives up and tries to grab him and throw him into a car. That alone, the trauma of that little incident there would be horrible, especially the younger the child is. But
and if that kid can't find safety immediately after that, then it'll stay with him his whole life, most likely.
Yeah. Wow. I again, there's so many different places that I think we could go with this, but I don't want to keep you too long. But let's finish up again with the healing process.
Sure.
Okay. So let's take a brand new traumatic event, whether it be, sexual in nature or, some kind of abuse that a child goes through.
Yeah.
What would be your recommendation to the parents, to the child? It's himself, maybe he's or she is a teenager now, has enough logic, has enough maturity to deal with, or at least try to deal with this trauma. How would you recommend they initiate the process?
Right. Well, it sure helps to understand what trauma is, how it works, how it is stored, why it is stored, and the effects it has on the body, both mentally and physical. It can have an incredible physical effect on you, negative physical effect on your body. So the book I wrote, Heal, which you can go to Jimmi Toro, JimmiToro.com. The first half of the book explains all of that, like we've been talking. It goes into that in detail. And then the last half of the book, there are 22, I picked 22 stories that we talked about, things that happened to me and how I went back and found the little guy and helped the little guy find safety, let's say. And so if parents especially are aware that these traumas literally can store in the body indefinitely, and that there actually is a way to release them, that right there is just magical. As far as parents being aware of their kids, these types of traumas, the worst traumas especially, they will change your child's behavior. That happy child will lose that brightness. You see it more in girls because unfortunately girls get abused far more than boys. But if a little girl is raped or even mishandled inappropriately, immorally, let's say, that light in that girl can be snuffed out. And okay, well, what to do, right? Well, if that girl is unwilling to talk to you as the parent because there's an embarrassment, which a lot of families there is, well, I would say search in your immediate family. You know, one of the things that grandparents can be amazing at, and it's not uncommon where a grandparent will look at their family, their kids' kids, their uncles and aunts, and look at the lay of, here's my clan, and here's some of the close associates they know, and say, okay, chances are my child, if something happened to my child, it happened by one of you all, one of you family members or one of the friends of the family that this little child knows. And often it's the grandparents who rat out the abuser, where the parents wouldn't, the siblings wouldn't, etc. And so, and then the other side is if something's wrong with your kid or they say anything that is a little off kilter, believe them. And if you're lucky enough to get them to open up to you, then, hallelujah to you. But sometimes kids won't open up because they're embarrassed. These predators, they threaten the kids with death, and it's very real to these kids. And they say, if you say something, I'm going to kill your sibling. Well, they do. It's not just a veiled threat. They often use tactics like, well, it's our little secret. And so they are so good at manipulating kids, and kids are at such a disadvantage mentally and physically to fight back or even know what to do. But if you notice anything awry, then it probably is. And then you can become smart. You can start investigating. You can start understanding. You can reach out and try to find a good therapist that would fit your child's needs. But it's a long road. There's a lot of sadness attached to it. But that's the way life is, right? And whatever you do, don't stop. What seems so daunting at first, if you keep at it, your courage and bravery grows. The daunting task doesn't change. So allow it to be an opportunity in your life to become smarter and more courageous. But whatever you do, face it head on. It's magical.
Yeah, I think hope is probably one of the greatest assets that people can reach out to, and based on what you were describing, just giving little Jimmy, the little 4-year-old Jimmy, hope that he can get through the traumatic event of the coffin trauma that he experienced. So, and I also, I don't know if this is a practice of yours, but when you're referring to your old self, you kind of do it in a third person. Is that a technique that you use?
Well, it's fascinating. When you go back, if you have a memory of something that traumatic happened to you, with the right help and the right knowledge, you want to go back and remember as much as you can. It's not uncommon in these situations to not remember all the detail, to remember more fragments of it. But you want to try. You literally want to go back head on into this. Well, when you do that, it's really strange in some way because the adult you is different than the little you. And yet it's you. And the little you has a mind and can imagine a way to safety that the adult you just doesn't. It's like there's two of you going on, and yet it's you. And after I'd rescued some of the rescues, I went back to rescue the little guy. I had already rescued, let's say, 30, 40 of these. And I was able to go back with a small little army of little Jimmies, let's say, and go rescue and comfort one who was in danger. And so they are like little individuals, but they're all you. That's just the reality of it, because that little you back in that period of time years ago, you had a mind. You were scared to death. Given the hope, like you say, that's really what I provided. The adult you provides that little you is the hope. I'd whisper in his ear, "What do you want to do?" And I could see his whole face go from horror to like, "Really? You could do that?" I'm like, "Yeah, you can do that. You can make up anything. You can have a magic sword appear in front of you and you can slay the people, or you can have a room." Several times he created this room, just space that we could go to, and it was floating above the earth, and we went to it. And he felt safe there because he felt distant from those who were abusing him. Several times surprised me after getting him out of he got out of a tough situation. I said, "What do you want to do now?" He says, "I want to go play." I'm like, "Play?" Yeah. We created a make-believe playground, and there were friends there, and he went and just played for hours. And after those episodes, I went and looked up a lot of psychological research about play and realized that as a kid, I didn't get to play. And it's so important. Even as an adult today, I love to play. I mean, this is a serious subject, but outside of this, I love to have fun and something very playful about me. And that's important in raising a kid. So the most fascinating, magical, like Harry Potter magic kind of stuff happens in that realm. That's the beauty of it all. And it literally releases it. It works.
Well, there's power in that. And
yeah,
I think one of the greatest sayings or realizations that I've ever had is, because we're here physically on this earth, and our experiences from when we're brand new babies all the way to the current is mostly oriented around, the five senses, the touch and sight and smell. But we are not physical beings. We're spiritual beings having a physical experience. And I think far too many people have never heard that phrase. And especially if you're ever having a spiritual experience, as a physical being, we can relate to those small instances. But when you flip that and you realize that, no, we are here as spiritual beings having a physical experience, then I think you have the capability to delve in deeper into what makes us individuals. But the core of us is different. If you think about, and again, I'm kind of in over my head, but I do have a strong spiritual background, and I believe that when we look at ourselves as spiritual beings, and yes, we had physical trauma, we had mental trauma, we had emotional trauma, but if we keep the core of our spiritual being and who we are, and that's untouchable. It doesn't matter what kind of trauma we go through physically, your spiritual being never changed, and that's always being protected. And my belief is that's protected by God. And to me, that's where my hope stems from. And I don't know if that is making sense to you, but
it is, because this journey back into your past to heal is it's a mental thing. I went through about a year of all that hard, yucky stuff, and at the end of the year, my body was so damaged I could hardly walk from one room to the other. I remember a couple weeks after my last episode, I remember bending down to do a push-up, thinking, okay, can I do a push-up? I got halfway down, it collapsed on the floor, and it literally wiped me out for 2 days. And I'm otherwise really healthy. So it's been about 6 or 7 months since that last episode. And I've slowly worked myself up to where I just last week, I ran a mile for the first time. So it really can have a taxing effect on your body. But to your point, it is all so much a mental exercise of going back into that. Definitely is. And the hope aspect is huge. I kind of equate this idea like, if you take a classic story told through history of a knight that has to go rescue the princess who was stolen by the dragon, that's been told so many times. Well, when that knight chooses to go on that journey and leaves the safety of the castle walls, it's no longer safe. There's danger, there's unknown, there's all kinds of fears that just come into the picture now. Behind the castle walls, there is safety. And if that knight goes and actually finds the princess, he has to contend with the dragon, his worst fear. And it's not fun, and it's painful, and it's not easy. And he has to kill the dragon. He can't just sneak around, sneak the princess out, and head back, and the dragon's still alive. That's not the point. And well, to contend with the dragon, chances are the dragon's going to kill him. So it's really dangerous. If he succeeds and brings the princess back to the castle, well, that knight has gone on his heroic journey. Well, if he gives up halfway to the dragon and comes back, that's not very heroic now, is it?
No, and I think especially to a man, that's as damaging as getting killed by the dragon. I think there's a huge part of manhood that we all have a dragon and multiple dragons sometimes but as men, it's our job to face that and go out and do it.
Even women too. They have, we all, so for those who have gone through trauma and have to go back into that and face it head on, it's akin to that idea, male or female, right? And you got to go head into that pain. But the message I would say that you don't hear a lot out there is that if you can figure out how to do that, like I did, the result is magical. You can literally offload that in its most magical way. And well, if that part wasn't part of this story, I wouldn't be here. And most people don't know that. I've read for years going through all this. I would just ingrain myself with every book I could read, listen to every podcast I could, people talking about the subject of trauma. And I rarely find anybody talking about the magical healing process of this. And it fits science too. You go study Einstein and other really incredibly smart people, and they talk about the fact that the past, present, and future are kind of one and the same. I never understood that. But now, the fact that you can literally go in your past and literally change it, literally, and release, and the fact that stuff's stored with you and you can literally release it. I never had one author that I read who said it so simply.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah, especially the body is kind of the negative storage of all the other senses. You know, when you have emotional trauma and even spiritual trauma and even physical trauma, the body is normally kind of the fall guy for that. And the one that's going to take one for the team. Yeah. And so once you start seeing those things being exhibited physically, then going back and dealing with those. But well, just for you, since you've processed that last traumatic event that you said you went through, 6 months ago?
Yeah.
How rapidly has your body been able to recover?
Well, in about 6 months, I went from hardly being able to walk across the room, literally, to I ran my first mile last week. Very slow. It's almost like, physical therapy. You break your leg and slowly work with a therapist where you can finally walk on it again. It's been that. And that's nice. And that's a great part of the story, let's say. But the more poignant part of that story is how physically damaging trauma can have on your body. If you carry that trauma for years, or you have that anxiety that keeps coming up, you deal with, etc., it is literally having a physical effect on your body. And I don't think that's news to anybody. People maybe question, well, can stress have an ill effect on my body? Yeah. And extreme trauma can have those hormones. You know what? When you're panicking, you're walking along a path and a tiger jumps out, you panic. What happens is your body takes the blood from all your organ area and pushes it out into your feet and your hands so that you can fight or flight. You can run. And sometimes you freeze. Well, you can recover from that the next day and your body will be fine. But when that happens to you over and over and over, or people who experience trauma or anxiety in their life over and over and over, it is having a damaging effect on your body. It just is. And I'm here to say, I guess, that if you can go on your heroic journey and figure out that as painful as this is, I'm going to face it because the magical idea of healing is a possibility.
Oh, that's
But man,
awesome.
it's hard to get, there's a classic story of Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table or whatever all that is. And their charge was to go out into the forest and find the most dangerous, densest, toughest part of the forest. And that's the path you go on. You don't go the easy meadow route. And, fixing trauma, I believe, is like this. There are groups out there, unfortunately, that get together like AA meetings and they talk about their trauma. And many of these groups conclude that, well, it's with me. I'm never going to heal from it. Like, what a sad group to go to.
Yeah. Well, to wrap things up here,
Sure.
and again, in researching, first of all, Jimmy, I think you're absolutely fascinating, and I really appreciate you coming on. It's been
Thank you
an
for
amazing discussion, and I highly encourage people to go out and look at your website, Jimmi Toro. That's JIMMITORO.com or .org. Which one is it?
The website is .com. The charity Rescue 11 is .org.
One of the things that I mean, you got T-shirts, you got all sorts of stuff on there, but your art is fascinating to me. And I'm not an art guy. I'm more into the sciences, and I have a military background, so having that almost precludes me from understanding any kind of art. But of all the art pieces that I looked at, and I even saw some of your videos where you're actually creating your art, the bowl and the thing that you were, but the cover to your book.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and what's the significance of it? Talk me through that really quick.
Well, it is symbolic. There's a female figure holding within the female figure, like holding a child, if you will, but the child is an adult. And it's symbolic of that many times with this trauma, we have to deal with it as an adult. And as an adult, the one thing we want is what that little person wanted, is the love of a mother. I mean, a father will do when there's still mother, and so she's cradling this adult figure who's in a fetal position. And there's a crow there, and a crow often symbolizes death, but it also symbolizes transformation. There's a sword there. And often in many of these episodes with me, that little guy wanted his own little sword to fight back. Just what he wanted. And the whole piece of art is very serene and quiet, but it's all symbolic of that safety that little boy wanted. Mothers are best at getting that, let's say. When I have 3 kids, and whenever me and my wife were home and they skinned their knee and they needed some comfort, they'd run them on.
Oh yeah. Well, I have 4 kids still at home, and my oldest daughter, or my second daughter, just graduated high school, so she's kind of off. But the 3 boys that I have, just reaching their teenage years, but just sitting in church yesterday, they could care less if I was even there. I think in the periphery. Yeah. Literally my 3 boys, and they're all almost, have twins that are, 13, and then the youngest is almost 12. And so, it's almost triplets, but the 3 of them, from the day that we adopted those 3.
Oh,
but from the day that we adopted them, and I think I don't know if this will ever change, but they will literally fist fight to figure, to win the place of sitting next to mom.
Yeah.
And I think that
the little ones, it's so important.
Yeah. And part of that is because when we got them through the foster care system, I don't know how much physical abuse they had, but some of them, at least 2 of them really had some serious neglect. And
keep that in mind. Those little boys could be carrying some stuff with them.
Yeah.
And how this all works, then the wiser you will be.
No, and I have to say, my wife, in the process of not just adopting those boys, but also in learning how to deal with their trauma, has become just an absolute angel in it. That is just something that men and husbands and fathers just can't duplicate. And we're wired that way. We're not supposed to. We're supposed to go out and be the hunter gatherers and and kind of be the protector. Standing at the entrance of the cave, and the mom and the wife and the mother is in there nurturing the children, and she has an ability to do that I will never possess, and I'm fine with that. I will provide for her and give her a castle to dwell in and take care of the little ones indefinitely, and that's my job, and I've accepted that. It's always kind of fun just watching.
In every episode I went through, I had female hand who I was holding everyone. It made all the difference.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Moms are a pure gift from God. And, you just can't overemphasize that enough. It's the role that moms play in society, I think, is just so absolutely amazing that I think anybody that's not taking advantage of that is really missing out on something. So,
yeah.
Any last thoughts, Jimmy?
Well, I really appreciate you giving this whole subject a platform, helping average good folks be aware that this danger is right in their community. That means a lot to me because it is. Most people don't know it. And if everybody can be just a little more aware, especially for their kids and these little ones, whether it be grandparents or parents or even teenagers, I will feel like all this effort is a little more worth it if we can raise a little more awareness that these creeps are right in there, and they wake up every day trying to harm your child. It's a real war. It's no different than you're in a community in the medieval times and warriors are coming to your town to rape and pillage and kill your village. They're just doing it in a different way to your little kids.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, there's a sickness out there that it's our job, especially to for the younger ones, to protect them. So
exactly.
Well, Jimmy, it's been an absolute pleasure. And again, go to jimmitoro.com and get his book. It's called Heal. And just based on our conversation, I know I'm going to be getting a copy and try to make my way through it. So, Jimmy, It's absolute pleasure, and I wish you well. And I hope if you have any other developments or write another book or something, please feel free to reach out to me and let's get you on the show again.
Thank you.
Okay, Jimmy, take care.
All right, you too.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.